We are a volunteer-led charity.
We wanted to fund some proper community research so we could investigate why historically underrepresented groups, who they are and what are the barriers to them taking part in a campaign with ours, and for them to be part of a co-design process, rather than quite often communities feel like it's people come in and tell them what they want. So we wanted to do things differently.
London has been given the first ever national park city status.
London, the world's first national park city.
Come and enjoy, because life's too short, really and truly.
And London, wow, what an amazing city.
So, greener,
Healthier.
And wilder.
So I'm Kathy McLaughlin and I'm a volunteer with East London Waterworks Park. I'm a member and I'm also the co-circle of the Inclusivity Circle. And I've been involved with the charity since January 2020. I'm a Waltham Forest resident, and the Waltham Forest Echo, I think, had an article about this dream to transform the concrete Thames Water depot into a park and natural swim ponds. And I'm a community gardener and I'm obsessed with rewilding. So that's what drew me to the project. When we first started, we were small in number and we were probably a stereotypical environmental campaigning group. We were residents, we were local Hackney and Waltham Forest residents, but we were predominantly white, older and middle class. And so we were mindful that is the stereotype of people who campaign for environmental issues. And we need to unpack that. We want to be truly representative and represent the community that we're from. And so the first bit of funding we did was to find out how much the land was worth, because we want to buy the land, whether the natural swimming ponds idea was feasible, and we wanted to fund some proper community research so we could investigate why historically underrepresented groups, who they are and what are the barriers to them taking part in a campaign with ours, and for them to be part of a co-design process, rather than quite often communities feel like it's people come in and tell them what they want. So we wanted to do things differently. So this is a GLA funded event this week, but that first little pot of funding was Space Hive funding from the Mayor's office too. And so because we're a volunteer-led organisation, it's taken us 4 years to complete the research. The first was desk research, where we identified the groups that were historically represented in the local areas. Then second, we then went and spoke to representatives in Hackney and Waltham Forest of those groups. And then this first stage was where we then spoke to at least 5 people within those groups to do that deep dive. In the process of doing the community research, the community told us about other groups we should also speak to. So we ended up extending who we were speaking to, and we were able to use other funding to do that. So if you get the listening report is available to download. So you'll see the list of the 19 organisations that we spoke to. It's about how people's subconscious biases come up. So on the one hand, single men would tell us, and young people would tell us that sometimes when they go into a park, that they feel a bit, it's like it's a family space rather than a place for like a single man to sit or whatever. They can feel that tension sometimes, that it's like, quite often it's like, oh, it's all families or it's all this. And then young people, again, similarly, they would say sometimes when they go into a park and they're maybe just hanging out with their mates, they felt like the families were judging them with their behaviours or whatever. So it's about being mindful of that. Actually, we all have our subconscious biases, but actually everyone just wants to connect with a space. So, and also what was really interesting was my colleague Nathan connected with a project that is helping people with experience of homelessness, often due to addiction issues. And so obviously quite often things like drug and alcohol abuse were highlighted as things that people found antisocial or what have you. And actually from those guys who've been through that experience, they was going, yeah, we understand that, but actually sometimes you need to have a bit of compassion around that, because that person, they're just, fixated on what's going on there. So it's about, how do we deal with that in a compassionate way and just trying to check in with ourselves. And also that, how do we connect and look after nature, you know, because people quite often, what came across all the time was how much people value nature and being in nature. But then I don't think people necessarily see themselves as part of nature all the time, and understanding that and how we work with nature, put the needs of nature with the needs of humans. That's what's really important. From research we did about the disability, well, I believe it's got lots of roots, but I came across it when I was doing research on disability, the disability campaigners in the 90s, can you believe, when they were chaining themselves to buses because there were no ramps to allow them to get on buses, which is just nuts when you think about it now. And that was it, nothing about us without us. And it should be that, you know, getting away from this idea that it's tick box consultation and people come and impose these ideas. If you're a person with disability, you're the expert, not someone who's brought in. So it should be the people who are going to use the park and have a disability are involved with designing it, because they'll do a better job that's actually better for everyone. Because the other thing I learned from, or the other key phrase from that research about disability was, it should be not yet disabled. Because at some points in our life, we might be injured, we might be recovering from surgery or whatever, and you're not 100% fit. And so it's as much an effort for you to get somewhere. So again, when you put inclusivity and these views, a diversity of views, it's better for everybody. It's about getting people to reflect on our place in nature, because we've become so disengaged, but we're part of the ecosystem. You know, and in a funny way, you know, when, you know, people understand their gut biome and whatever, it's exactly that. Wherever you go, so it's like we are part of nature. Wherever we go, you know, you're taking that in, you're eating plants. And that's how we've evolved as a species with nature. We're not separate from it. There's been this very unhelpful thought that we're like top of the food chain and we can do whatever we want. Well, we're essentially we're killing the planet by doing that. So it's about people stopping and going, you know, understanding we're part of it. And actually people know that when you stop and think about it, even a few generations ago, our families were more connected with nature. You know, fun enough, I was thinking about the Victorians, although there was a lot of pollution, the actual amount of birdsong and everything they would have been hearing would have been far more. They had storks. The Victorians had you know, so we don't even appreciate what we've lost now. So it's about sort of getting people to think about that. And I think things changed because of lockdown, because people had time to stop and look, and actually connecting with nature and noticing the birds and the birdsong and the bees and the butterflies. People found that it was so good for their mental health. So I think there are these shifts happening. Plus also there's a book, isn't it, that's quite mainstream at the moment. Is it Are Rivers Alive?
Okay, yeah.
So there's more and more conversation about this in the mainstream, and more people finding nature as a way to overcome trauma, long-term illness, you know, so people are just sort of, in a way, funny enough, just finding it naturally themselves, I think. The project that's as ambitious as this, that it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we've just got to keep going and going. And the other thing we take inspiration from is like the Victorian Parks movement. It was just a group of people who was like, we need to invent parks. And they did. Yeah. Or the people with Epping Forest. We want that to become the people's forest. And so it was, you know, so why not? That's what we say, why not? You know, the guy from the Eden Project, I'm going to, you know. Yeah. So you just got to go, why not? Why not?
Sustrans is a good one as well.
Yeah, exactly. Just why not? We just need to keep going.
I'm Nathan. I am one of the directors at East London Waterworks Park. I've got a background in master's level education and crowdfunding, tech products, and I got involved in 2021 when I saw a local project that I wanted to get involved in with a view to creating a park in my local area that I would want to be accessible for my children. I thought at some point they would want to do a big crowd fund to help buy the land, and that has been part of my experience. I've raised 1.5–2 million in 30 days for projects in the past, and so thought that kind of experience might help. And so I joined initially the fundraising circle, and then my appetite and love of accessibility and co-design and education brought me mostly into the design circle, where we bring together architects, ecologists, anyone from any background that wants to be involved in the design of the park, and the learning circle, which I started in 2021 as well. And we run projects to design green spaces and develop green skills with schools, primary schools, vocational colleges, universities, all with a view to creating East London Waterworks Park and other green spaces. We are a volunteer-led charity, and we have 6 different areas of work. So anyone can join any of these areas of work, and we call them circles. They're fairly autonomous. They decide on the aim and domain in which they are working in. So we have design, which is architecture, ecology, gardening, civil engineering, and lots of people who don't have any of those backgrounds who want to learn. But for example, we have first-year architects, we have experienced landscape architects who have done master plans for London Zoo, and the Chief Design Officer of the UK Design Council, and retired architectural professors, and they're all kind of, people at the different points of their career within the design group. But then there are 5 other groups that have similar sorts of people volunteering in them. So we have design, which I've mentioned. We have fundraising, so lots of experienced fundraisers, fundraising for all the co-design activities and the transformation of the different spaces. Learning, as I mentioned, works with projects with schools, universities, vocational colleges. Inclusivity, which is what the project is about today. It specifically works with other charities to listen to people from backgrounds that have been historically, strategically underrepresented and undervalued in the design of public spaces and green spaces. Communications, so we have lots of web developers, lots of web designers, social media people, artists and illustrators, all working to communicate what the charity is up to. And then governance, which I think is the 6th one, thinking about charity administration, community governance, business models, all of those sorts of things, sort of tying it together. So the 6 circles, we make decisions by consent, so anyone can bring a proposal, and that can be, it's not made, we don't have to find everyone's complete backing for a decision. It's not consensus, it's consent, and can you live with this idea? Most of the time we find consent for the decision, the group decisions that we make, and that also means that lots of people bring skills that they want to share, and lots of people get skills out of it as well. We have people going from urban designer to social worker, and designers who have joined the design circle and get into the inclusivity circle. So it is accessible to anyone. And we're developing sort of green skills and an agency around how people think about public spaces and green spaces as we go. Fairly early on, we realised that volunteering is only accessible to a certain demographic of people who have time to volunteer, and we wanted to make sure that the park and the project as a whole was designed for everyone. I come from a mixed race heritage background, so when I joined the project, the inclusivity circle was up and running, though it was fairly early in its infancy, and being drawn to it because of my heritage background, knowing that we would be listening to people from different backgrounds about their cultural thoughts around swimming, for instance. And so I know that people from Caribbean heritage are often much more comfortable swimming in tiled swimming pools than sort of muddy water banks, like my mum is an example. And how do we listen to people in order to design spaces that can be made more accessible to make positive change in the kinds of cultural backgrounds that we're talking about? And so that sort of started fairly early on in the project. It started with some desk research. I remember reading some PhDs around accessibility and how different kinds of cultural backgrounds, people from different kinds of cultural backgrounds interface with different kinds of gardens. So perhaps people from different kinds of backgrounds like more wild nature, and some people from different kinds of backgrounds like more kind of ordered gardens. We recently did a workshop at Hackney Caribbean Elderly Association where some of the folks there were worried about sort of wild nature and bugs, and how do you sort of create more positive experiences for sort of wilder nature where there might be cultural predispositions to different ways of interacting with nature. So started off as listening, but then how can we positively influence and help people go from thinking, oh, I don't like nature, to realizing that they do. And that's often happened in our interviews. People are saying, oh, I don't like nature. You know, it's the first question. What comes to mind when you think of nature? Oh, I'm not sure about nature. It's too muddy. It's too dirty. It's a bit unpredictable. But then, you know, for instance, at the mosque at the end of my road, midway through the interviews, we were talking to the folks there about poetry that they had put together about fruit trees back at home in Pakistan. And so just reframing nature in different contexts. And it wasn't that people don't like nature, it's just that they thought of nature in different ways. And how can you sort of listen to people to make ways of accessing different spaces more relatable to their cultural backgrounds. Yeah, I think first of all, the approach as a whole, while it was extensive, actually the approach was quite, we were able to talk to people in quite a high level way. And I don't think it actually takes, beyond organising the workshops and working with the charities themselves, listening to people is not as intensive as people might think it is. Listening is not that hard, I guess, is the first port of call. And that most questions can be answered with starting with listening. But in the context of the report, I think things like so we had a lot of interesting tensions around, for instance, when busyness and the busyness of spaces is good, and how that, you know, when you have a busy restaurant, that indicates something good, but also people want to access nature in quite a quiet way. And how do you kind of balance those sorts of things? How do you balance the safety or authority of the police with, you know, lots of people that we listen to don't find the police very safe? One kind of interesting aspect, and you know, the phrase park wardens came out, and a lot of what we're thinking about is like volunteer led, but the sort of the aspect of having like you don't think of a librarian as very authoritarian. They know where things that you are going to ask for are kept, but very few people are afraid of librarians, and yet they have a domain of authority in their space. So I think there's kind of interesting things we can learn, and all of that came through listening, and how we can sort of apply. I think probably the most interesting thing coming out of when you listen to people is that there will be tensions between what different groups of people will say, and how can you find ways to include everyone. I think that there are ways to include everyone. It's not that different groups of people have, you know, different needs for different reasons, but actually when you put them together, you find that they're actually quite similar. Different religious backgrounds, different identities, and when you think of them in the context of themselves, people actually have quite similar needs. And I think listening to people is the start, and how you synthesize those aspects is how you then go on from there. I don't think I went in with any assumptions. We might have had assumptions of, like, you know, religious groups or different kinds of class or background or identity groups. We might have had assumptions around how they might want to have access the swimming ponds, for example, but you just have to listen. I think the most surprising things that I heard were in the realm of, and I say it's surprising, like almost when you say what was surprising, I think going with a kind of a listening attitude, in that because you're ready to accept and listen to what everything that is there and then kind of integrate it, almost nothing is surprising because you don't have a pre-disclosed notion of what should be. Some of the most surprising things were things that were, for instance, from the bargee traveller community, so people who live on boats near the site, not having access to clean water and having to travel, not having a fixed address, things like that where maybe I guess in that assumptions there are that everyone has those things, and not everyone has those things, and so you have to sort of readjust and think, oh, hang on a second, how can we provide things that should be accessible? And so most of the assumptions came from things that that you would not think of, and then suddenly realize, oh, not everyone has access to that. And those were the most surprising things, and actually some of the most innovative things, like can we provide fixed addresses for people who don't have fixed addresses? And a lot of the site design is going to be around cleaning water, and so providing clean water in those contexts would be really interesting as well. So I think there's an attitude in listening that I think provides the opportunity. We're not thinking of the solutions before we've come to the listening, which I think lots of consultations have a solution in mind before they approach people, and I think there is perhaps an attitude shift there in sort of listening. But where I would say there were surprises where the sort of the base level of what you would assume to be and people have to have access to is not. And so how can you create resources to share resources for more people? We've run a few different workshops with Choice in Hackney. Recent workshop around swimming in nature and community reuse, and had a really, really amazing interview with a lady who was a championship Olympic level swimmer and had some amazing feedback about swimming spaces. She hadn't swum for many years due to osteoporosis, but at the same time she didn't know what a natural swimming pond was, which was one of our key features. And so the approach that we take while we're doing sort of lots of listening, there's a non-extractive where we're hoping to share our learnings as well with folks in our workshops. And when we showed her some of the pictures, we got a lot of amazing feedback from the interviews and the workshops. We've got the phase 3 report that we published. We had some amazing connections to different organisations. Together Space in Walthamstow, parents with kids with SEN D needs, and some amazing workshops. Outward, charity that support assisted living. Other interesting thing about these workshops is that the relationships continue with the other charities. We're connecting with other charities and their service users. Often we get people volunteering from these workshops, so they're enough of a good experience for people to say, oh, hang on, what you've shared with me I would like to be involved in, because we're open to all. I remember workshops with the South Asian community where an electrical engineer joined us. People recovering from homelessness, folks from there have joined the Inclusivity Circle and continue to do further research. And Outward, so this charity that support assisted living, we are continuing our relationship with them, and we're going to support them in planting trees. We're going to doing some tree planting 50 trees to support 50 years of the charity. So a wide variety of different charities and other community organisations. So phase 3, the report we've just published, 19 different groups of people. So, people recovering from homelessness, as I mentioned, people recovering from mental health crises, a range of class, age, ethnicity, culture, living situation, income backgrounds. I think in the next phase, where we're exploring swimming, community reuse and circular economy, learning in nature and community spaces, is I think going to grow to 21 or 22. So including different groups that we've had feedback on including. So each of those different areas we're going to speak to and listen to and do co-design with about 100 people. So about 400 people in the next couple of years around those issues. And regardless of what happens, I think listening to people, for instance, a lot of different kinds of people from lots of different kinds of background about outdoor swimming, or about recycling and community reuse of materials, or about community spaces and how different groups use them, and learning in nature. I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting learning that comes from all of that, that can be factored not in just to the design of East London Waterworks Park, but hopefully also the design of other green and blue spaces around the capital.
Come and enjoy, because life's too short really and truly.
And London, wow, what an amazing city.
So, greener,
healthier,
And wilder.